Hello guys, welcome to the channel. So in this video we are going to look at how to create zonal cluster from console and CLI. So we'll see two cases. One is a single zonal cluster wherein both the control plane and the node pool is in a single availability zone. And the other one, multi-zonal cluster, is where the control plane is placed in a single zone, but the node pools can be spread across multiple zones, like two, three, four, whatever the count you need, based on the distribution of your node pool and for the availability. So let's start with this. I'm in the dashboard area of the project. So there are two ways how you can easily get to the Kubernetes overview page. So one is from the left menu here, you have Kubernetes and then directly go to the clusters, or you can come here, search for Kubernetes. You will get the Kubernetes Engine option. Yeah. You are in the Kubernetes Engine page. Right now we are in the overview page. So to create a cluster, you have to go to the clusters page. So here you have the create option for Kubernetes cluster. So I'm going to click create. So by default, you are taken to the uh, autopilot cluster creation page because Google recommends using autopilot clusters as a best practice for effective management of the compute from the Google side. But what we're going to do is we are going to show how to create a standard cluster. So I'm going to go with the standard cluster. You get a notification that describes about why Google recommends autopilot clusters and some more details about the standard cluster. So let's click on switch to standard cluster. So yeah, we are in the standard cluster creation page. There are a couple of notifications. Avoid that. There is an outage in Google region. So we'll go with the uh, basic setup of the cluster. So the first thing is that you name the cluster. So I'm gonna name it as standard single zone cluster console. So we'll be creating one more cluster from CLI. So I'm gonna use the CLI as name for that. So for now, I'll this. So the type of cluster we are going to create is a zonal cluster, and then we choose the zone where you would like to have the control plane to be hosted. So I'm gonna go with the default option, and I'm not gonna change anything release channel or cluster tier. Going to the next page, fleets we'll discuss in a different uh, video. For now, we'll skip this. The next is the node pool section. By default, GKE has a default node pool, so let's go with the default node pool node so itself. So I'm not gonna change any name. I'm not gonna choose any other option. The number of nodes, I'm just gonna keep it one at minimal for now. So not gonna put any other option. Not gonna enable auth or anything. So let's go to the next option. So here you have the image type. I'm gonna keep it container optimized OS. This is the machine configuration. The family you have to choose here. We are going to go with the general purpose E2. The mission type is E2 medium. This would be enough for us to deploy have a sample load deployed, which we'll be doing after the cluster gets created, and um, to show you how to deploy a sample workload to a cluster. So yeah, the disk type, I'm gonna reduce the size. The usage is not gonna be more, and then that's all. Here networking, I'm just gonna use the default networking settings. um, yeah. So basically the default networking settings will use the default VPC auto mode VPC that gets created with your project. So yeah, going to security side, we are not gonna do anything much. We are gonna use the default service account. Metadata. So in the metadata side, couple of things I can show you is that you can add Kubernetes labels for the node pool. this you can use it in your workloads which you deployed in the cluster to specifically target a specific node pool or something. For example, if you're going to have front-end loads hosted in a certain type of node pool and the back-end loads hosted in a different type, you can add a usage tag and put it as front-end. Pains and tolerations we are not going to look at. I'll show you a sample labels. So here you have this is at the node pool level again, but these are the GCP side of labels. So front end, if in case you want to do cost allocation and stuff, this is usage. You can put ownership details as well, like you're part of a DevOps team. Then put that here. This is just that Google is disabling their legacy metadata endpoints. We don't have to worry about that. So uh, automation, we are not gonna do anything much here. Going to the next section, which is networking. As I said, we are not going to change any networking side of things. We'll just have the defaults. The VPC that is used is the default VPC, and the node subnet is the default. That is for this region the region that you have chosen, which is US Central One. Um, so that's pretty much all. Not gonna touch anything else. Going to security, not doing anything here too. Backup plan, we are not gonna have any backup plan. It's a sample cluster. So here you have metadata. You can add a description like something like uh, standard single zone cluster for training purpose. Not needed, but for just doing it, I'm just doing that. So this here also you can this label is for the cluster level. So you can add a usage label like the usage is for training purpose, and then in case you want to add some owner or something like um, the team name, say showed earlier for the node pool. And then the features, I'm just gonna disable logging, monitoring, and manage service for Prometheus. We are not gonna use that, and much of cost. So that's pretty much the configuration you have to do. This is pretty basic standard single zone cluster. So here you have additional options like REST option if in case you are going to create make an API call to the TCP API and then create a cluster, right? So uh, you have all the details that you put in all the sections filled automatically here for effective usage. Google also provides you with the command line option, wherein whatever the all the settings that you put in now is already populated for you for usage from the CLI. So yeah, so I'm just gonna skip it. For multi-zonal clusters, we can use this option. So I'm just gonna click on create. So the creation is getting submitted. I'm looking at that one. So yeah, if you see the cluster, it's currently getting created. The status is the cluster is being created. So if you just go in, uh, as you can see, the cluster creation takes 5 minutes or more based on the configurations you have done for the cluster. So yeah, I'm just gonna wait for this cluster to be created and then use this cluster to deploy a sample workload and then show you how uh, like for example, we are going to put a sample Nginx deployment and then access the Nginx default page from our browser. So in the meantime, as the console cluster gets created, what we can do is I can also show you how to create the standard single zone cluster from the CLI as well. So either you can use the CloudShell, which is already pre-built and available here. So if you when you click on CloudShell, what in the backend happens is TCP provides you a compute instance and then also provisions you with the uh, uh, 5 GB default storage for your home directory, which is the current path. So, so CloudShell by default comes authenticated to your current project from where you start the CloudShell, and also it uses by default it uses your uh, Google account that you used to log into this project. So if you want to see all those details, you can run Gcloud config list command. So here you will see which account it is using, which project details, and other additional default settings that Google makes for you. So right now we are going to just use a simple Gcloud CLI command to create a GKE cluster. By default, it creates standard single zone cluster. So I'm just going to copy the command that I have already wrote for it. So I'm just pasting it here. So this is the command Gcloud container clusters. Sorry. So this is the command Gcloud container clusters create standard single zone cluster console. So let me change the name. We'll name it as CLI because we are creating this cluster from the CLI. So the release channel is regular zone, Control C, and then the node locations are US Central One C. So I'm just gonna hit enter on this. Sorry. Yeah. So now we are going to create a standard single zone cluster from the CLI. So I just have the command pre-built. I'm just gonna copy paste it here. So Gcloud container clusters create standard single zone cluster, and then let me rename it to CLI because this the cluster that's getting created from CLI, and then mention the zone where you want to create this single zone cluster and also the node locations. So I'm gonna hit enter. So uh, yeah, so cluster is getting created. So this takes another 5 to 10 minutes. So in the meantime, let me go and check if this cluster is created for console one. So still getting created. I'm going to pause the video and then come back to it once this cluster is up and running so that we can have a sample Nginx application deployed and then so so yeah, so the console cluster is created. So as you can see here, the status shows that in a mark. So that means that the cluster is created and the cluster status is healthy. So let me move this to a new window so that we have this area to uh, the whole screen area for us. So yeah, Uh, so as this is a single zone cluster, as you can see, the control plane is in US Central 1C, which is one zone, and default node zones are also set to this specific zone. So here you can go through additional settings that we already configured when we created the cluster. That's available here for your review, or you can make a change using this edit option. And if you go to the nodes section, so here you will see the node pool and nodes. So this is the default node pool that we created. So it has one node, the machine type we chose, and so the node is also displayed here. This is the node that belongs to this node pool, which is has the default node pool. Uh, uh, yeah, so if you go inside to this node pool, you can see here also the node pool level settings that you might have applied. So the container OS version, the GKE version, the number of nodes, node zones, the zones in which the nodes for this node pool will be created and will be part of, and yeah, and other additional settings for the node pool. here you can see the metadata labels. So you have the usage Kubernetes label, which is usage front end, and the node pool labels, which is owner DevOps and usage front end. So uh, these will get populated for the node also. So for example, if you go to the node and go to the details, and here you will see that you have this usage front end label added for the at the node level also, and also for, let me do a control F. So here if you see this is the same uh, the label that we added for Kubernetes labels, which is usage front end as well, is available in the annotations also, which you can use it while doing scheduling your workload to specific node pools. You can use this label. Go back. Go to the CloudShell to have a sample workload deployed. So we'll use kubectl to deploy this Nginx workload. So what I'm gonna do is I have command pre-written. So first, before that, what we have to do is we have to get the kubeconfig for so that we can connect to this cluster using the uh, kubectl command. This is the command. So Gcloud container cluster get credentials, the cluster name, and then the location where the cluster is created. So if we hit enter, so yeah, so this gets your kube config details, and then an entry will be created for this cluster. So where the kube config cluster details will be available for you are under your home directory under the .cube folder in this config file. So if you would like to view the details, yeah, I'm getting this file. So here you have the cluster details, the certificate authority data, and then the API endpoint and the cluster name. These are the context details. For this cluster, you have the cluster username, which links to this user, which user to use, and the name, context name, and also the current context details. And here you have the user details. So the username and what type of authentication to use, which is using the Gcloud auth plugin, which is uh, the recommended and the default authentication method. So yeah, now that we have the kube config file, let's check our what is our current context set to. Yeah, so here this is the yeah. Oh, sorry, I think it is showing CLI. So let me uh, change it. So use context. And this is from a earlier session. So I'm just gonna uh, copy the context name from this config file and use this context. So now if you check the current context, it is set to this kubectl get ns. So this runs this command tries to get all the namespaces on the cluster. So these are the default namespaces that get created for you. So now what we are going to do is we are going to deploy a sample Nginx application to the default namespace. So this is the kubectl command for that. Kubectl create deployment. The name is Nginx and the image type is Nginx. Hold on, let's. So it says that a deployment is created. So what we are going to do is check the deployment and respective pod details. So yeah, we have the Nginx respective pod up and running. Sorry, here it's here. The Nginx pod is up and running. And the next step is that we have to expose the application so that we can access and check the Nginx default page. So the command for that is kubectl expose deployment name Nginx and the port on which you will like to access, and the target port of the application, which is 80. I'm setting both the exposing port as 80 and also the target application port, which is 80 for Nginx, and the type of the service is load balancer service, because we need to expose this application to internet. So basically get a public IP so that we can access this application from our browser. So I'm just gonna hit enter. So I'm just gonna add service option to this kubectl command. So yeah, so here we have the engine service created, but if you see the external IP is pending, so this takes a little time. So in the meantime, let's go and check if the CLI cluster got created. Yeah, the CLI cluster got created. So you also get the cluster details also, the cluster names, the zone where you created it, the master version, the master IP. This is the your API endpoint, the mission type, node version, number of nodes it's running, status of the cluster as well. So if you come here, go back to the clusters page, and then go to this cluster. So here you have cluster which is created from CLI. If you see all the settings are same, location type is zonal, the zone name, the default node zones, and the node pool is here. So since you didn't mention the number of nodes by default, it takes the default number of nodes for the node pool. So it is 3. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And if you see, all the nodes should be created in the same zone as well. So if you go and see the node zones or use central one, see. So yeah, that's we have our CLI cluster also. Now let's go back and see if the survey got the public IP address. Right. So we have got the external IP address. You have the engine default page available via this IP endpoint, which is what we copied from here. So that's pretty much a basic deployment scenario, like how to deploy a workload to your GKE cluster. So now that we have seen how to create a standard single zone cluster from console and CLI, let's go ahead and uh, have a multi-zonal cluster creation also. So like how to create a multi-zonal cluster. So for now, let's delete this cluster. So I'm just gonna go inside this cluster, delete it, and then copy the cluster name, and then paste it here, and then delete it. So have the cluster deleted from the CLI. So the command is something would be like this. Yeah, right. So yeah, so this should be the command. Gcloud container cluster, delete the cluster name and the location. So right. Sorry, it's not container cluster, it's container clusters. So so you get a prompt that you would like to continue deleting the cluster. Give yes. So yeah, that's how you delete a GKE cluster from the CLI. So if you see here now, both the cluster should so that clusters are being deleted. So now let's proceed with creating a multi-zonal cluster from the console. So yeah, so you're given autopilot and standard option. Go with standard. So uh, here, what I'm gonna do is name the cluster as standard multi-zonal multi-zone cluster console. So yeah, and then choose the zonal option, and then what we're gonna do is to make this cluster a multi-zonal cluster, we have to we are going to use this option. So if you choose this, you get uh, multiple other availability zone options as well. So what you're doing here is you are going to choose the default node locations. Earlier we didn't choose this because it used the cluster configuration as itself. The zone was US central ones here, and the node pool was also US central ones. Now we are going to add a couple of zones here so that we can make the node pool spread across the multiple zones for our workload availability. So I'm just gonna choose this, not gonna choose any other settings. Going to node pool configuration. I'm just gonna leave this as it is, and then I'm just gonna reduce this node count to 1 because we are not gonna use that much node. So You will, if you see here, total in all zones is set to 3, because what we have said is our default node pool zones are central 1A, central 1B, central 1C. So one node per zone, so it is 3 nodes. So we'll pass through the rest of the settings. So I'm just going to reduce the disk size here as we did earlier from 100 GB to 10 GB. Network settings, I will just leave it as it is. Security, nothing to change. Metadata, we already saw that. I'm not going to make any change here. Automations, nothing. Network, it's all default. Sorry, security, it's all default. Backup, I'm not going to enable. Metadata, I'm not going to put anything in the feature. I'm just going to disable logging, monitoring, and manage service automation, which we already did. And yeah, that's pretty much. So I'm just gonna use this option to copy this so that uh, we can use this command to create a similar cluster from the CLI as well. So let's just edit this name and have it kept. So I'm just gonna close this. I'm just gonna click on create. Yeah. So this is getting submitted, and so you see we are. Our cluster is here, standard multi-zone cluster console. So side by side, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to this CLI, CloudShell, and I'm just gonna copy paste this with all the similar settings, but just we're gonna create it from the CLI side. So uh, hit enter. So that's pretty much it. You can also use console to get off all your configs, and then uh, take the command line out of it and then use it from your CloudShell or the Cloud CLI from your local as well. So this is getting created. It's gonna take another 5-10 minutes, and our multi-zone cluster is also getting created. That's gonna take another 5-10 minutes, which is what we created from console. I'm just gonna pause the video and then get back to it once the clusters are deployed. Okay, so we have our console cluster created, the multi-zone console cluster. And also in the meantime, the delete command that we ran for deleting the single zone standard cluster that was created from CLI, that also have completed. So you have the status updated here. So now let me go into this cluster and show you the details. So now if you see, this is still a zonal type cluster, but if you see, the control plane is limited to one zone, but the node pool, you have multiple zone availability options here. So that's the pretty much change you can notice between a standard single zone cluster and a standard multi-zone cluster. So all the configurations are gonna look the same. I'm just gonna quickly scroll through it because you won't see any differences. And now what I'm gonna do is gonna go to the node section. Here we have the default node pool. We have the number of nodes is 3 because we said one node per zone. We didn't enable autoscaler. And these are the nodes that are created in the different zones. So if you go inside this node, uh, this is created in central 1A. And if you go inside this node, this is gonna be created in a different availability zone 1C, and this node it's gonna be in 1B. So yeah, we have our workloads uh, that will be deployed split into different availability zones. So even if in case of any disaster in this zone, even if your control plane is down, you're gonna have your workloads up and running in rest of the two zones. But you have to make sure that you deploy the workloads in that specific way, that you have additional replicas running in the uh, other zones to have your availability. So yeah, that you will have to make sure as part of your deployment, app deployment configuration. So let me go back to the clusters page. So I think, yeah, our CLI cluster is also created. So the command we ran here. So yeah, created, it gave you all the details. So yeah, so it's going to be more or less the same. So the underpin zone, the nodes, pool, default node zones. And then if you see here, you have the default node pool, 3 nodes, one per zone. And yeah, it should be one per zone that we chose. This node should be spread across that. So to connect to this cluster, it's more or less the same. Like uh, the command should be more or less the same. I can show you that too. So let me get this command. I'm gonna come here and we are going to change the multi-zone cluster CLI and then we zone it. So yeah, you your kubectl is fetched. So you can run kubectl config git context. So here you have the multi-zone cluster CLI context. This is our old standard single zone cluster console context. So if you would like to go ahead and query anything from this cluster, you can run kubectl get-ns, which will get you all the namespaces from the multi-zone cluster. So as you saw last time, it's the same set of default node namespaces that got created. So that's pretty much for the standard cluster creation from console and CLI, and we also saw how to deploy a sample workload and access it from the browser. So let's go ahead and delete this clusters as well as part of our cleanup. So just do this and then add to as it's getting submitted. Let's come here to have this cluster deleted. Just copy this two values from here. Gcloud container clusters delete and paste the name, and you will get a prompt to yes. And yep, so the cluster deletion has should have started here. So yeah, so this should get cleaned up in a few minutes. So that's pretty much for this video. Thanks for your time.